Good evening. My name is Jiyoung Kim, and I'm serving as president of Korean Cultural Society of Boston. On behalf of society, I welcome you all to the Artist Talk Series. Hosting series of events is particularly a culmination of efforts put together behind the scenes. I'd like to acknowledge Jaehook Lee, who spent countless hours contacting speakers and organizing this meaningful symposium. And also behind the scenes are unwavering support of the society board members, spearheaded by Dr. Jung Jung-uk. And we are fortunate to have financial support from Overseas Koreans Foundation, an arm of Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Korea, and the Korean Consul General in Boston. In support of this series and congratulations of the Artist Talk series, Consul General Honorable Ki-jun Yu will graciously provide a short remarks. 유기준 초용사님 언뮤트 해주시면 되겠습니다.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to offer a warm welcome to all the distinguished guests at this event tonight. I'm so happy to be a part of the Korean Cultural Society Boston's Artist Talk for contemporary Korean artists. I'm delighted to have been invited to participate in this very first session. Although we are meeting online rather than in person, this does not detract from the charm of this event. I take this opportunity to extend my sincere appreciation to the Korean Cultural Society of Boston for its wonderful efforts in arranging this lovely occasion. I greatly commend the devoted endeavors by the KCSB to promote Korean culture in New England. Just last week, the New Music Symposium came to a very successful conclusion, and it was indeed of great value in terms of enabling the audience to gain a deeper understanding and appreciation of contemporary classical music through conversations with acclaimed Korean musicians. I'm glad to announce that the KCSB has now arranged an exciting new event featuring contemporary Korean artists, Artist Talk, which will be moderated by Professor Sunglim Kim of Dartmouth College. I have no doubt at all that we will very much enjoy the global cultural exchanges through visual art and benefit so much from having the chance to talk with artists of Korean heritage. With Professor Kim's expertise in pre-modern and early 20th century Korean art and culture, we will explore the world of Korean aesthetics of Joomchi, traditional Korean paper, Korean shamanism, minhwa, folk painting, and fiber art in the next 4 weeks. And I trust that we will gain tremendously from learning how Korean traditional art can be intertwined with global art, creating a harmonious synergy. We are all well aware that the Korean wave is being enjoyed by people all around the world, and in this spirit, it is heartening to witness the trend of Korean culture being infused with the Western world, and these together fostering a new harmony. This session tonight, which was postponed last year because of COVID-19, is much awaited. We very much look forward to artist Jung demonstrating her innovative method of Korean papermaking, Joomchi. Unfortunately, we cannot appreciate the beauty of sculptural and textural imagery of her work in person today. Nevertheless, albeit online, the inherent beauty of the art will never fade. I once again express my heartfelt gratitude to the KCSB for all their great work, for the fruitful holding of this artist talk, and we very much look forward to the very talented Joomchi artist Jiyoung Chung presenting her superb work tonight. Please enjoy your evening, taking a journey into the world of Korean traditional art. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Consul General Yu. I have to apologize that I have to introduce you first. And so this is kind of backwards, but here is the brief, the introduction of Honorable Consul General Yu. He has master's degree from Korea University, University of Edinburgh, and London University, or in law. And he served tours of duties in Italy, Thailand, and UN in New York and Kenya. And before he came to Boston, he was DG for International Legal Affairs at the Ministry of the Foreign Affairs in Korea. And thank you again for your the heartfelt remarks. Now, let me also the highlight the artists that will present their work in this series. And without artists, the artist talk series cannot work out. So the Jiyoung Chung will talk about Joomchi today, and Yuhan An, and Sungmin An, and Chung Kim in the next three weeks. And we are really fortunate to have a moderator, Professor Sungmin Kim in Dartmouth College in New Hampshire. And she had a PhD degree from UC Berkeley, and she is now associate professor in Dartmouth College. And her main interest and research area is in the pre-modern and early 20th century Korean art and culture. And I'm not going to read all of it, but she is looking at the history of the particularly the middle class Koreans in the 18th, 19th century, and how they influenced the production, distribution, collection, and consumption of the arts, the various arts. And she received a Korean Studies grant, prestigious Korean Studies grant from the Academy of Korean Studies in 2020. And she also, is an author of Flowering Plums and Curio Cabinets, the Culture of Objects in Late Joseon, Korea. And she also curated a traveling exhibition on Korean checkgery, the books, etc. That's a rough translation, in US museums in 2017, and authored and also co-edited the exhibition catalog, Checkgery, the Power, the Pleasure of Possessions in Korean Painted Screens. And this, here is the flyer that at the Korea Institute in Howard University, not so long ago, she had a presentation virtually. And at the bottom, you see what are meant by checkgery, including books. Okay. So without much ado, I'll pass the microphone to Professor Kim. But before I do, I again thank everyone for coming, and hope you enjoy it, and see you in the next symposium. And most of all, hope to meet you in person very soon. Thank you. And Professor Kim.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kim, for your very kind introductions. Today, I am very pleased to introduce Joomchi artist Jiyoung Chung. Jiyoung is a painter and freelance writer who shows her works in nationally and internationally. She has developed an innovative method for utilizing a traditional Korean method of paper making called Joomchi in a contemporary art form. Born in Korea, Jiyoung came to America for higher education. She graduated from the Rhode Island School of Design, majoring in painting, and also holds a Master of Fine Arts degree from Cranbrook Academy of Art, majoring in print and media. She has had over 30 solo shows all over the world, including Korea, the USA, Australia, France, Finland, Romania, and the UK. In 2010, she curated the international Korean and American Joomchi show for the European Patchwork meeting in France, and later toured in Korea and in America. She also authored how-to book titled Joomchi and Beyond. She has received several awards, including the Adriana Federley Prize for Excellence in Fiber Art at the Philadelphia Museum of Art Crafts Show in 2012. And more recently, she was a recipient of the Gold Award at the Smithsonian Craft Show, Washington, D.C. in 2019. Finally, her artworks are in the permanent collections of the Fidelity Corporate Art Collection in Boston and the Museum of Art and Designs in New York. Many of you are probably not familiar with Joomchi art. So before Jiyoung gives her presentation, we are going to watch a 2-minute video clips with an introduction to Joomchi art. And during Jiyoung's presentation, if you have any questions, please write them on chat box. I will collect them and ask the questions after her presentation. Of course, you are welcome to give your comments or address any questions during the Q&A session after the presentations. So now we are going to watch 2-minute videos.
Joomchi is a Korean way of making textured paper. In old times in Korea, textile was quite expensive because they have to spin the yarn, weave, and make a clothing. So Koreans use this technique, which requires like combining 2 to 20 layers of mulberry paper, and with water and eager hands, we break down them and make it into one strong textural paper. We wet the paper, and with lots of squeezing it and agitating it, we break down each layers of paper and reconnect them as one. It only requires paper and water and eager hands, and anyone can make the paper anywhere. And such as like I have been making paper in the toilet, airport, Amtrak, like bus station, parking lot, any place that you are eager to make the paper, you can. It has such a unique characteristic because sometimes like I feel like I'm dealing with a children or a child rather than material, because paper starting to resist to break down again, because they said to me like I already formed and dyed in beautiful color. Why should I re-break and combine with that color? I don't want to do that. But the more I work on it, they say, okay, you have been like agitating me enough. I will start to break down and combine. And it gets easier and easier to agitate. But at some point when you thought like, oh, it will be so easy to do it and think something else, then suddenly just paper whips and it is telling me that you're not paying attention to me anymore. But it's like repetition of the same process, like agitating, kneading it, squeezing it. So once people got used to the technique and it become more like a meditative process. I hope they will learn the basic role of the Joomchi, how it practiced in Korea, and its like history and how we as Koreans made it. But not only learning the basic process, I want them to incorporate into their own art form and bring the Joomchi technique into the next level.
Okay, I hope this gave you some ideas. And now I would like to introduce, ask Jiyoung Chung give a presentation. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Can you see me? Sorry. Hello, my name is Jiyoung Chung, and I'm so honored to share this unique Korean paper technique called Joomchi. And thank you so much for the really nice introduction from Professor Kim, and also giving me this beautiful opportunity from the Korean Cultural Society of Boston. I'm so honored. So I will share my screen, PowerPoint screen now. Just give me a sec. Okay. So this technique has been handed down to me from generation to generation. So whenever I do lectures or workshops, I always would like to show the image of the woman who practiced this technique and hand it down to me to give back the proper respect. And in Korea, paper craft, there is 6 different methods. One is 색지기법, which is pasting the paper onto an object. Second is 지승기법, which is coiling and twisting to make objects. And third is 지워기법, which is casting in with the papers. And fourth is 지장기법, which is pasting the paper onto a bamboo structure to make a rain head or wardrobe. And fifth is 지화기법, which is making paper flowers. And sixth is 후지기법, which means it's combining several layers of paper to make one thick paper and Joomchi is part of this method. So today in Korea, there is 2 different paper artists. One group is keeping the tradition alive and teaching to the next generation. And second is more contemporary paper artists. And since I learned my first paper making from my mom, so who is a fiber artist as well as a paper artist, I would like to show a couple of her images. So what is Joomchi? How Koreans used it? Like as I mentioned in the video, like in old times when the textile was expensive, because they have to spin the yarn, weave and make clothing. So only the rich people can afford to wear the fabric clothing. So what the normal people like me did, we just run around naked? No, we have really good quality papers. So we're starting to combine from 2 to 20 layers of paper to make one strong soft paper fabric. But so this is the treasure of, but sadly, like, just like other like beautiful tradition, when the textile industry became so popular in Korea, and takes much shorter time, this beautiful tradition was less and less used. So what I've been doing in over the 2 decades is like trying to make it into an art form so that this beautiful tradition can be handed down to the next generation. So since I cannot demonstrate how to make the Joomchi, so I'm prepared a couple of traditional making Joomchi. So Koreans use this technique to make a basket, lamp, purse, or clothing. So these are the made Joomchi clothing, and once the clothing is made, you can easily paint on it, or you can hand dye it, or you can discharge it to add more visual effect. And also, not only you can make a functional clothing, so you can also make sculptural clothing. And when I first started teaching this technique, and there was not many Korean artists who works with the Joomchi, But recently, like there is a newfound interest in Joomchi in Korea, especially fashion department. So I was invited to teach a semester, and these are some of the result. And you can make airplanes, web skirt, funky vest, or sculptural clothing objects. So the traditional way of making Joomchi is actually making one color or two color paper fabric. So all this, but I would like to be more like variety practice in art. So I starting to manipulate and develop it more. So this called whole Joomchi, making holes with different mediums, but following the same Joomchi technique process. So this is made with the awl. This is made with the paper punch. This is made with the paper punch and scissors. And to get the natural holes, we also rub the paper onto the rocks. And also you can make cut Joomchis, and this is paper was cut with the hands and with the knives. And it can be partially cut or entirely cut. And as a painter background, I would really like to add the more textures and different colors and different papers. So I come up with this crazy chart. I think because my father is an engineer, I have this crazy engineer thinking. So what I'm starting to do is, in order to incorporate the smaller pieces, which is really hard to do it with a traditional method, instead of squeezing and throwing it, I starting to folding it. And also to speed up the process, I starting to use a spray and rod. So what this new contemporary way of Joomchi making does is it's a new way of creating paper collage without any glues, and also it's much stronger to make a self-standing or suspended sculptures, and or just like a regular piece. And I love sharing this technique with the non-Korean and student or artists, because unlike us, like they don't have any preconception of what the Joomchi is or how it is supposed to be used, so they can go behind. So these are some of the class scene at the RISD. And sometimes it gets bigger, then we starting to use not only using hands, but we also starting to use our entire body to agitate. And another thing I challenge my artists and students are the multitasking. So she's making two pieces at a time, and she's eating while making Joomchi with her foot. And she's making one Joomchi with the foot and another one with the hands. And another thing I challenge my artists or students is pushing their limitation of size. So this is 2 tables of the 3 feet by 8 feet, done with the bubble wrap, which is a shortcut to the contemporary way of Joomchi, and came out like this. And this is another large piece that was made 12 feet by 4 feet in Joomchi, all done by hands, which is the biggest one on that one of my students made so far. And so this new contemporary way of making Joomchi, you can make painterly Joomchi, and also as long as the base is 100% mulberry, you can add non-mulberry papers. And the reason we have to use mulberry paper is the fiber is 8 times longer than other fibers, so it endures the process. So this was done with the newspaper, mixing with the wallpaper, mixing with the Xerox paper, pattern paper, and also you can use nail polish or gauze or packing paper. Or you can also make something simpler, more design oriented. So this is good example of before Joomchi and after Joomchi. So the bigger picture is the before Joomchi and the smaller is the after Joomchi. We are using dyed paper, so dye runs and blend with another dye and making more painterly. And also you can make a written Joomchi, which means like you're writing with a permanent marker. So on the edges is before Joomching it, in the middle is after Joomching it. So even though it's permanent marker, it washes out in the process, but gives really nice aged look. And another written ones. And also you can make a written Joomchi with the oil bar, or you can cut out of the lettering from the books. And also you can make textural Joomchi, which means you're mixing thread or fabric in between the layers. And this is good example of the before and after so on. And also like you can hand stitching it or before or after Joomching it. And also it's really interesting to mix like non-paper material like straw or fabric. But this case, they themselves doesn't attach with the paper. So you have to either tack down onto the paper or sew them together to hold it in the process. So this is silk cocoon that sandwich in between the white paper and stitch it to it. So I love using sewing machine, even though I'm really terrible at it. But it's another way of making sewn Joomchi using sewing machine as a drawing tool. You can sew it and Joomching it. And you can always do that after Joomching it too. Well, if you are not familiar with the sewing machine, you can always do the hand stitchings. So this one was made machine sewed, Joomchi, dyed, and then hand embroidered. Hand embroidered with the marker drawings. And also you can paint, or you can paint and sew it to make sewn and painted Joomchi. And also after Joomching it, you can use sewing machine without thread and make, I call it air drawings. And also you can make a stamps afterwards, or you can print onto the mulberry paper and Joomching it. So these are some printed Joomchi. And also the process is so similar to felting. It's really interesting to mix with the felt material, wool fleece. But wool fleece itself won't attach with the paper, but they themselves felt in the process and create really interesting textures. And you can put the wool fleece on top of papers, or you can felt the wool fleece and then Joomchi it and mix it later on. And since it's so similar to felting process, like a lot of felters starting to mix Joomchi technique with the actual wool fleece. So this is our experimenting of mixing paper with the wool fleece. So the color is paper one, and gray is the wool fleece. And also you can make woven Joomchi. This is regular woven Joomchi, irregular woven Joomchi, close woven Joomchi, or partial woven Joomchi, or you can also mix with the actual fabric with the paper. And one year I had the opportunity with working with the weaver, so I challenged her to make a double width Joomchi. So this is the result of it. And once you made the paper, and if you don't like it, you can cut it and recomposition it. Or still, if you don't like it, you can cut it into smaller pieces, sew it, and just Joomchi a little bit more to get rid of the sharp edges, then you get scrapped Joomchi. But if you don't like the way that the controlling the openings, you can do the hand stitchings to make sure you can control the gaps in between the scraps. And also, as I mentioned, this technique, you can combine from 2 to 20 layers of paper. And once the layer is more than 15 layers, I call it multi-layer. So these are some of the examples of multi-layered Joomchi. It can be circle coming out or circle going in. And another thing we do is like experimenting with the fiber. How does this Joomchi process reacts with the paper fiber? So this is done by hands, done by bubble wrap. and rubbing by hands and rolling up by hands. And also you can make a sculptural object, either self-standing or partial like this. What you do is you go through the Joomchi process with at least 3 or 5 layers of paper and shape it and let it completely dry. And if you don't like the shape after dry, you can always re-wet it and reshape it. So these are some of the funky objects. So this is, you can make a boat. You can make a bowl or baskets or sculptural books or bags, slippers. And by mixing mulberry paper, you can make funky sculptures, lanterns. And once it is made, the texture is so similar to a fabric. It's really interesting mixing with the actual fabric and making installation, which you are seeing on the right side. And also we make paper yarns. What does we do with paper yarns? We use it as a linear coloring on 2-dimensional work or part of the books, or make funky wall drawings or papers or sculptures, or we knead it and Joomchi it to make clothing. And also we experimenting unconventional wearables with the Joomchi. So these are elbow protections and exotic necklaces. And even though it looks really bulky, but it's really light and airy. And also you can make brooches, cups, unconventional shoulder piece, or hats, or funky hats, or bonnets. And a lot of artists are starting to make books, one-of-kind books. And also we experimenting with the adding a new way of like coloring into the Joomchi. This is by plant, indigo dye, or direct dye, also unconventional like coffees, like blueberries, or how the seasoning reacts to the Joomchi. And also we are experimenting with the fire, yeah, with the incense, lighters, soldering tools, or also we can manipulate the paper after making the Joomchi. And also we do the rust print, and also rust print with the salt. And in Korea, like there is 3 traditional way of making paper waterproof. One is soybean juice, second is persimmon juice, third is lacquering. After we try like first 2 method, we also move into the unconventional way of waterproofing the paper, which is wheat paste or gel medium or beeswax. And this is good example of using beeswax, which makes the, so on the left side is before the waxing it, and on the right side is after the waxing it. So beeswax makes the paper translucent and waterproof. You can use it as a whole, and sometimes you can make it really thick and let it dry and crumbling it to make a fine and cracks, and then you go back with the soldering tools to add the burn mark. And these are some of my artist work exam from the curated show. So it started as a Korean and American artist, yes, but nowadays it has been 50 artists from 7 different countries. But in Korea, like there is like 5 really well-known Joomchi artists, and I would like to personally show some of their work too. So this is Sang-un Yang, who is like Joomchi sculptor, who make Joomchi paper and make us into a sculptural object. And this is Kim Ji-eun, who use a lot of holes and shape it. And third is Nam Sang-jae, who makes the Joomchi paper and weave into a structure. And fourth is Kim Yumi, who makes the Joomchi paper and make a sculptural object. And last is Woo Bong-hee, who makes a lot of colorful Joomchi and so need to make a collage. I prepare a lot of artist images to give you a more idea because Joomchi is not well known yet. So these are some of the fashion designers' clothing that is made with the Joomchi. So some clothing are wearable and some clothing are more sculptural. And you can also make a contemporary ornament or wall hangings. Since I don't have that much time yet, still have a lot of images to show, so I will skip some of the description. And you can, this is printed and then Joomchi'd it to make a wall hangings. And crazy woven Joomchi. This is actually three-dimensional book that made with the Joomchi technique, and another wall piece using multi-layered one. And this is a sculpture during the daytime, becomes a lantern at night. And this is installation, conversation piece between the Joomchi and found objects. And from now on, it's going to my work. And actually, I always emphasize technique, and the most important part is the concept. So while I'm showing my work, I would like to read my artist statement. So the Whisper Romance series began as a result of a conversation I had with my father after reading a disturbing article in the newspaper years ago. It was a story about a son killing his parents. My father said, this has happened because the essential relationship has been broken. My thoughts on this concept became the foundation of this series, the many facets of broken relationships. We have horse whisperers and dog whisperers, but I believe that we need human whisperers to hear what has been broken in our essential relationship, to ourselves, to nature, and to God. It is important to be reminded of how important and valuable each of our lives are, regardless of where or how we were raised, or what position we found ourselves in now. We need to live our lives to the fullest to make the most of what we have. The holes and layers and free mounting of my works represent these conversations, the whispers and the breath between them. So I'm starting to bring back the colors on my work. And of course, the red is the first color that has been brought back. And also this is from last year work. And since last year, I've noticed that there is a space behind the work too, which I usually don't pay attention to. So I'm starting to utilize the space behind my work as well. And these are from this year's new work. And this series is like called Inner Peace. We are living in a really uncertain time of our lives. And I'm really hoping that everyone who are listening to my talk have a inner peace in their heart. So these are my most recent work. And this is actually quite old work, but this is one of my all-time favorite. This work is about his tears, and my concept about is is that even I love my work to death, but I cannot give up my own son to have a relationship with others. But in the Bible, there is a verse in Bible that like, include everything that I want to talk about through my work. It said like, God so loved the world, he gave his one and only son. Whoever believes in him will not perish, but gain eternal life. So like the love that we are getting from the God, I think that itself has to be like, more than enough for us to be always happy, no matter what situation or what kind of like, lives we are having. And thank you so much for listening to my talk. And if you are still interested in about this technique, I have a book that also has more illustrations and how to make it and more artist work. You are more than welcome to look into it. And actually, I have one last video that I would like to share that represents my work, explain my work really well. So I will just play. Her work was oops, sorry. Sorry. Sorry, I'm just trying to get back to the main screen because I would like to show a couple of things. Okay. Okay, so since I have 2 minutes, I would like to show some of the things that I couldn't show during the PowerPoint presentation. So this is the real tradition of making in Joomchi, which is a 2-colored, or it can be 1 color, only 3 layers, but you can see how strong it is. And also the more you wear it, it becomes more like leather-like. And people were wondering what happens when the clothing got dirty. We cannot put it into a washing machine, but we can gently hand wash it, and the paper has this memory of the wrinkling, so it goes back to original state. And also how the Joomchi technique works. There is 2 different bonding happening. One is mechanical bonding, which is like squeezing, throwing, kneading it. So mechanically breaking each layers of fiber to make it into a one strong paper fabric. And second is the hydrogen bonding, which exists in high cellulose fiber. such as mulberry paper. And what it happens is like when the water evaporates, it increases the fiber to coil. That's how it is done. And also I love this technique because you can make it anywhere, any place, as long as you have the right kind of mulberry paper with the eager hands. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Jiyoung, for wonderful presentation. I cannot wait to have my hands-on this Joomchi technique. I know you occasionally open a Joomchi workshop, and
Yes.
do you have any upcoming workshop plans?
Yes, actually, I have a one happening in Boston in a couple of weeks at the New Art Center. And there is still a few spots left. So if you are interested in, then please join me to learn to the journey of learning Joomchi.
Great, wonderful. Thank you. Now I would like to open the floor for questions, Q&A sessions. So please, everybody, feel free to raise your hand through the the emoticon, erection emoticons, or just raise your hand. So yes, please.
To show something.
We like to show some, art. We went to Jeonju for our mission exchange.
Oh, yes.
And then,
Paper table. Yeah, floor table.
yeah.
That's the paper,
Yeah.
not Joomchi.
Yeah, not a Joomchi, but it's made with one of the paper craft. Yeah.
I see.
It calls 색지기법, which is pasting the colored paper onto a structure, but it's one of the traditional paper methods.
Like
So this, the ordinary people can do this, right? Not
Yeah, lanterns, yes.
Not
Yes,
just artists, right?
yes,
Okay.
so when were you at RISD?
yes.
When?
What year?
Oh,
What year?
I graduated year 2002. Yeah,
2002. Wow.
yes.
I've been living around this area since 1973.
Oh, wow.
So we used to purchase many the student artist pieces,
Oh, I
like
see.
oil paintings and all kind of artist,
Oh,
yeah, student artists.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, I also saw Johan Han raise your hand. Do you have any?
Oh, thank you. It was a wonderful lecture, and then I'm honored to be presenting next week together with your grant starting today. I just want to ask you a few things. I was very struck by your own work the last 15 minutes of the lecture, and I saw a lot of very unique oval hole shapes, most
Yes.
of the works, and then also the presence of white, red, and black.
Mhm.
And I was wondering if you also assimilating your image making in relationship to other non-Korean artists who is using the holes such as Libon Taku or Alberto Buti's types of paper distortion. I'm just
Oh.
curious.
It's hard to say. The shape itself originates from, so my mom is a Bojagi artist, so I always grew up watching her work. And the more I look at her work, I was more interested in how each small pieces are joined together by the stitchings.
Mm.
And especially I love the stitching holes that needle makes. This like in order to have a relationship with others, we need to expose our vulnerability to get more close to each other. And I saw the stitching, the hole that thread and needle goes through each pieces, like symbolize that event, and the small needle holes got much bigger in my work.
Mm-hmm.
And then also the color wise, it was I always people always say like, do what the teacher says, but don't do what they do. And I always challenge my student, but also I don't want it to be like, afraid of not challenge myself. So one year I challenged myself to get rid of all the colors except white and gray and black, and see if I can still convey what I would like to convey through it. And then years later, and then I started to bring back the colors again. And yeah, actually that's how I got the holes in my work. I hope
Yeah,
I
I thought
answered
so.
your
Yes.
questions.
Thank you
Yes.
so much. The holes were very powerful. As you mentioned, I felt the vulnerability at the same time. I also felt the pains in there. Yeah, thank you.
And actually, I prepare a couple of pieces to show. Let me get, can anyone, this is one of the pieces that I did, and there is a lot of like holes made also not only made with the rubbings, but also using the incense. And also I love adding the stitchings, symbolizing the connection between the humans. So this is some of the newer works. And I would like to show one more piece. And this is like 3-layer piece. And each layer has 4 different layers that combine it together. And people often ask that, like, how do you make holes? Do you cut it? I never use scissors in my work. It's all rubbing off the fibers. And if you remember the sculpture that I showed you in my PowerPoint presentation, the small balls, I call them Joomchi beads. Those are the fibers that I gathered while I'm doing the rubbing of the fibers. So I waste nothing from the paper, because anything, I think it's just like a life, like we should take advantage of every situation, every thing. So I try to not to waste any of the materials and push the technique further. Am I making sense? Sorry.
I have a question.
Yes.
Well, Joomchi, thank you for wonderful presentation, first of all.
Thank you.
And Joomchi is such an old traditional technique, but nowadays, even Koreans don't really know about the technique. So what is the reason why this traditional technique was not stopped being used? You know?
In America or in Korea?
In Korea.
Oh, in Korea. So just like other beautiful, wonderful tradition, when the textile industry became so popular, because this technique takes time to make it. So anything precious takes time, just like a relationship too. But this process takes quite a long time to make one piece. So when the textile industry became so popular in Korea and much cheaper and much faster to make an actual fabric, this beautiful tradition was less and less used. But even though it takes time, but there is a reputation of same motion, like a squeezing, throwing, kneading it. So the more you get used to the technique, it becomes more meditative too. And it also not only get meditative, it also has a physical and mental benefit doing this technique. The physical is like, because we are using a lot of upper bodies, so you will get all and squeezing it. So your hands and arm muscles, you will get much stronger the more you do it. So, so even my husband is much taller, but I have a stronger arms. And physically, like, you can think, because as I mentioned, it becomes more meditative. So whenever you get angry, you're coming back home, you can just start making the Joomchis and think it as the person or the thing that makes you angry. And by the time you finish the Joomchi process, you will be physically tired to be angry. And also you have a beautiful piece of art. So from doing this, you don't need any like therapist.
Thank you. That was good.
So any question more?
So do they have at a Museum of Fine Art in Boston?
Yes,
Huh?
today. You mean
Your- Your artwork or any Joomchi?
Exhibit.
oh, not in the Museum of Fine Art in Boston, but the fidelity art, like their corporate collection, they collected one of my big wearable piece. Yeah.
I see. Fidelity. Mm.
And somebody asked me, like, for Joomchi, is it possible to use any type of paper? No, it has to be 100% mulberry paper, because the reason is like the length of fiber is 8 times longer than regular paper, so it endures the process. But for the contemporary version of Joomchi, as long as the base, which means like for the wall hangings, usually 3, and if you would like to make a sculptural object, like usually 4 to 5, as long as the base is 100%, you can mix with the non-mulberry paper to enhance the more interesting surface. Because shorter fiber will break much more in the process, but leaves really interesting broken and surfaces.
So the paper,
Yes.
they produce in United States or only Korea?
Oh, since I teach the traditional Korean method, for the workshop, I bring the Korean, 100% Korean mulberry paper, but you can use any kind of mulberry paper as long as it's 100%. And the easiest one that you can find in US is the kojo, which means Japanese paper. Yeah, but it's a little more expensive. So if you're just practicing, try to use the Thai mulberry, which is cheap. It's a little less quality, but just for a practice, it'll be good. But if you would like to make artwork, I will recommend use at least Korean or Japanese mulberry paper.
Mulberry paper is a 뽕나무 paper or 닭나무?
Dangnamu. Yeah.
닭나무.
Yeah.
So do they have at the Risti Art Center?
Not really, but there is a paper store in Providence. They call it Paper Connection. They're starting to carry the Korean paper. Paperconnection.com. Yeah.
There are actually 2 questions. Can I ask them for them?
Yes.
So Jill Wu asks, it's a wonderful presentation and where she can buy the book. And Christina asks whether it's possible to use any type of paper or is there a specific type of paper that must be used?
Okay, the book is, if you go to the beyond and above.com is a publisher, so you can order it online. And the paper, it has to be 100% mulberry that you can purchase, yeah, through the art supply store. Yeah.
Well, okay, I think it's time for us to conclude. Thank you everyone for coming to the first of the 4 presentations in the Artist Talk series. Thank you, Jiyoung Chung again. And next Saturday, we have artist Yoan Han presenting his painting. So I hope to see everybody next Saturday as well. So
thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you.
recording can be stopped, but we can, stay and hang around